Good evening. Welcome to the fourth edition of Heart to Heart with the Hansons. This is Sunday, April 27th, 2014, and I'm your host, Reverend Kristen Hanson. Tonight we're going to be talking about the number one drug killer in America, opiates. In 2010, over 30,000 people died from accidental opiate overdose. We're going to be talking about how millions of Americans become addicted unsuspectingly, just like myself, from either being in pain management due to illness or injury or from having a long-term illness such as multiple sclerosis, cancer, lupus, etc. It's a hot topic. It happens to a lot of people that we know. Joining me this evening is my husband and best friend, Leaf.
Thank you, Kristen. Tonight's a very important show that we're excited to bring you. When we began the Heart to Heart series 4 weeks ago, we didn't know if we'd have more than 2 listeners, basically our moms.
Right.
Okay. We're so happy to report that we have had over 350 people that have listened to our series. And we want to say thank you so much to those people.
Yes, thank you.
We want to say
much.
Thank you for being part of the show. Thank you for being part of the family here at Heart to Heart Radio. Your participation tells us that the subjects we're bringing matter.
Yes.
Okay, tonight is going to be a little different. It's going to be more a free-form edition. You know, the people are going to be calling in about their issues. We're going to have a couple of people instead of just one speaker.
One guest this week, yes.
We're also going to invite a special guest, but don't know if he'll show.
We did for fun to see if he'd show. Maybe,
we'll see.
Maybe
if he shows, you'll know. So let's talk a little bit about, what opiates are. What happens when we get addicted, about the genetics of addiction.
Yes.
Who gets addicted, what happens when we want to stop, because it's not as simple as, hey, I quit. We're going to talk about the symptoms of withdrawal, what goes on in the brain of an addict. We're going to talk about relapse. We're going to talk about triggers that cause us to relapse. And then Kristen's going to share some of her personal story. I'm going to share some of my personal story. Then we're going to talk about some nifty maintenance drugs called methadone and Suboxone.
Yes, very effective when used properly. It really can make withdrawal and your experience of shifting from opiate use to not much easier for some people.
Yes. So as we begin tonight's show, I'd like to bring you some of the shocking statistics that we've been researching. Here are some of the current statistics from the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Okay, 52 million Americans over the age of 12 have used prescription drugs illegally at least once in their life. Okay, now when we say 12, we're talking 13, 14, 15-year-olds. There's kids there. What's up with that? We have 6.1 million people in the past month alone have. That's kind of crazy, too.
It is. I agree. I didn't think it would be that high, but it is.
Well, here's something that's even more shocking. 5% of Americans consume 75% of the world's prescription drugs.
When you think about that, 5% of Americans, 75% of all the world's prescription drugs, that's all kinds of countries, that's all of Europe, that's all of Asia,
right.
That's all of India, that's all these countries.
And that's crazy. And opiate addiction is linked to 50% of all the crimes in the United States.
Sadly, it is. This drug causes us to do things that we wish that we wouldn't. Yes, we're going to talk about that more later.
And then 2/3 of the people in opiate abuse treatment centers were physically or sexually abused as a child. Over half of the violent crimes, including homicides, assaults, were made by people under the influence of opiates.
And sadly, people that also use opiates are victims of violent crimes. And that's true what they say. 2/3 of people in opiate abuse treatment centers have been physically or sexually abused. Most people that have some sort of addiction issue, we find have been abused or had some sort of dysfunction in their early childhood, which leads them to use something else later in life. So, when I first started using opiates, I was already in my 40s. I had already, been an alcoholic. I had quit drinking, and I never really had any experience with opiates or really realized just how dangerous they were.
They are.
So we have codeine, there's Vicodin, there's Oxycontin, Percocet, diluted, I never say it right. And they're primarily used to treat pain. They come from opium. They're made from the poppy plant. Some of the higher dose ones are buprenorphine, methadone, morphine, and of course heroin. And what happens is a lot of people starts off with taking simple prescription pain pills, and because you can't get a prescription, and because you can't get it as easily as you'd like to. A lot of people have a tendency to use heroin because it's easy to get, it's cheaper, and they don't have to worry about lying to a doctor or playing all kinds of games. So you can end up with a prescription, and then before you know it,
Sure.
you're using heroin, and it literally goes that fast. And another thing that really makes opiates, so attractive is that it's not just that they take away your pain, is that they're a mood elevator. They help with the euphoria. So you're lying there with a broken leg, broken arm, whatever happens, and not only are you feeling great, you don't even really feel the pain. So that's what adds to it. Another problem is we develop a tolerance quicker to the euphoria
Sure do.
than we do to the pain, to the
effects of
the pain medicine. Yeah, absolutely. And when you develop a tolerance, then you end up needing more of the drug, and it becomes more of a physical addiction, not a mental addiction. You're not sitting there saying, oh, geez, I really need the drug. It's
Sure.
more my body needs it.
Exactly. It's more a physical craving than anything else. So let's just talk about what happens when you become addicted. When you become addicted, it leads to an overwhelming urge to get the drug no matter what. You begin to engage in illegal activities, by going to multiple doctors, multiple hospitals, fake injuries, whatever it takes to get it. You get to a point where you're willing to hurt the ones you love. You're willing to steal from your family. You're willing to, steal from your friends, pawn off any items that are worth something, and it's such a strong drive that people will do this. Now, people will move to other means that they normally wouldn't, like using sex to get drugs,
Mm-hmm.
or lie and manipulate,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately it leads down a very dark road.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people get to a point where they lose their home, lose their car, lose their job, career. They lose their family and friends. And worst of all, they lose their self-respect. They lose their dignity, and you wind up with lost life, and you know what? It's a real sad end.
It is a real sad end, and it happens so innocently. You can go in for one thing, and then before you know it, you have this overwhelming addiction. And a lot of times, what happens is, and that we're really not prepared for, is genetics. And I'd like to talk a little bit about genetics. They say children of addicts are 8 times more likely to develop an addiction.
That's crazy.
Yeah, my father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. My daughter's father was an alcoholic. So, it says that we have an 8 times greater risk of developing an addiction. Now, they say that it's not any one particular gene, but it's a group of genes. It's kind of like, when you have a dog and it has a pedigree, it has a perfect, like particular characteristics. In genetics with drugs and alcohol abuse, it's the same way. It's a group of genes.
Same sort of lineage.
Yeah,
yes.
That's passed from generation to generation. So the one thing that really isn't clear is that why is it that some children that are born into these marriages or relationships of addicted parents don't have an addiction? It never comes to fruition. And then some children in families have
more propensity to addiction.
They come from a family that doesn't have any problems, and then all of a sudden,
like
they
a white collar family.
Yeah, they end up with an addiction. So
happens.
One of my things that I think, one of my personal things too, is I think it has a lot to do with coping techniques. I think it has a lot to do with what does the child see going on in the family? How is mom and dad actually handling the situation? Is it, when dad comes home from drinking, come home from work, is he, going to the fridge and getting a beer? Is mom drinking every night and smoking?
Kind of a learned behavior.
Yeah, exactly. I know in my family, we were all partiers. Everybody drank, everybody smoked, everybody came over. But, what you don't really think of is that these things have an addiction aspect to it. You can
Sure
become
do.
addicted from these behaviors. So not only are you addicted to the drug, you're also addicted to the behavior as well.
Sure.
It's kind of just like when a boy grows up in a family and he sees his dad hitting his mother.
Right.
He grows
he grows up to do the same sort of behavior.
Yeah,
to learn
do the
behavior.
same thing. And then a girl, looks for someone to hit her. Another thing that children learn too is the way that their parents, have other, like even criminal behavior. Are the parents dishonest?
Sure.
Do they lie? Are they manipulators? Are they flim-flammers? Are they always trying to get something for free? Are they always trying to switch the price tags or, try to pull a fast one? Children are watching. So I think why a part of it is genetics. I think some of it is learned behavior as well. And a little bit later in the show, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about genetics and my personal family history and why I avoided opiate use for so long. And eventually, I almost succumbed to the same fate as three other of my family members, and I'll talk about that in a little while.
Yeah, so no one ever really thinks it can happen to them when they begin taking opiates. Our series is about people who accidentally or unwillingly became addicted to the pain meds. People who get sick with cancer, debilitating illnesses, arthritis, lupus, degenerative illnesses, MS, stuff like that. People who are injured in car accidents, end up in the hospital, broken bones, that sort of things. And also people like in sports, dance, gymnasts, skating, professional athletes, those people that push their bodies beyond the point of common sense and actually injure themselves trying to perform above what their body can perform.
Oh, absolutely. Well, your daughter was in cheer. She'd been
wound up injured.
My daughter, I have two daughters in dance. They're 19 years old. They've been in dance since they've been 4. One has broken her foot twice. They've always got broken bones, something happening. And I'm very careful to tell the doctors, watch what you're giving them. And I'm not blaming the doctors here. It's not the doctor's fault, but I'm mindful because of them being young and what can happen. It's very easy to become addicted.
People find themselves on pain meds for a few weeks to several years, and then they find themselves in horrible trouble. Opiates aren't something that you can just stop taking when you want to. You have to be weaned off of them slowly, and usually it takes treatment, and we definitely recommend someone who is medically trained to supervise you while you're going through treatment. More than ever, people who never used drugs in their life are becoming opiate addicts. More than ever, it's the small town mom, it's the engineer husband, it's the doctor, it's the teacher, it's the business professional, as well as people like you and me. We get addicted unsuspectedly, and then what?
And then what? And there's so much shame around it, and there's so much guilt because you're sitting here thinking, how can this happen to me? I'm a mom, I'm a business owner, I'm 40 something years old, and here I am facing this now. Are you kidding me? And I came around it so unsuspectingly,
It is. You did not even sign up for that.
Didn't even see it coming. Yeah, and thank God. I'll talk a little bit later too. I had a wonderful doctor who was so helpful in my process.
But let's talk a little bit about what happens when you decide you don't want to take them.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about withdrawal. Okay, there's 2 kinds of withdrawal. There's the acute withdrawal and the post-acute withdrawal. Okay, acute withdrawal is very intense, and that usually goes on for your first 2 weeks. Most people hit the wall in that 2 weeks. They're the ones. I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. I'm out of here. This is enough. I'm done. They're suffering low energy. They're suffering, restless leg syndrome.
And that restless leg syndrome, that can happen in the arms and the legs. And that's the one thing that just threw me over the edge. I cannot handle that feeling. You're laying there and when they talk about kicking, I mean, you're kicking. I'm going, what the heck is happening to me? And I can't stop this. It was a terrible feeling.
So, run up with like hot and cold sweats, muscle aches and pains and abdominal cramping. And this can last for 1 to 2 weeks, usually beginning anywhere from 4 to 8 hours after your last opiate dose. Okay, you begin with the feeling coming down with what feels like a cold. You start to